Greetings, fellow Gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And I'm Count Jackula.
And today we're going to talk about Malum, a new horror film about a rookie cop whose first shift is a last shift of a decommissioned police precinct that may or may not be haunted by a creepy cult. Now, if that movie sounds familiar to you, if that premise sounds like you may have heard it before, that's because Malum is a remake of 2014's Last Shift.
But it's a remake done
by the original director and writers. So this movie is essentially a filmmaker coming back to the project that put them on the map and trying to improve it, essentially, with all the stuff they couldn't do the first time around, but they can now because they either have the budget or the experience to pull it off.
And it's way better than Last Shift.
Oh, it is way better. Okay, so our feelings on The Last Shift when we first saw it, because I actually went back and rewatched The Last Shift and then rewatched our vlog on The Last Shift when that came out, because fucking 8 years ago, we talked about this movie on this channel.
This is a really creepy, really scary, really effective horror movie with a really, really unsatisfying ending.
Yeah. It ends on it's a great movie that ends on a wet fart.
That's a good way to put it.
Our feelings was it was a very creepy, effective horror film with a very mediocre ending.
Oh, I would actually say that the ending sucks on toast. It's bad enough that it ruins the rest of the movie for me.
Gotcha.
You know, so it's like, yes.
So you've gotten meaner about the movie.
I've gotten meaner about Last Shift, yeah.
But this movie is an improvement over all the problems from The Last Shift. And all the stuff that's in The Last Shift that works, that is also in this movie, still works. And all the stuff they add that wasn't in The Last Shift improves upon everything from The Last Shift.
Yeah, as far as the remakes go, this feels a lot like the difference between the original Evil Dead and the Evil Dead remake of 2014.
Oh yeah, because it's like way more in your face, way even meaner.
Yeah.
Which Evil Dead was already a pretty mean film.
Yeah. But like the tone is different, the plot is different, the story is different.
Yeah.
But it has all those same elements. It's very much its own movie. You do not need to see Last Shift to appreciate anything that happens in Malum.
No, even if you haven't seen The Last Shift, you'll appreciate Malum. And if you have seen The Last Shift, you'll probably still appreciate Malum.
Yeah.
Even if you loved The Last Shift and thought it was perfect, you'll still appreciate this movie because it's different enough to where it does feel like its own movie, even though they share a very similar core conceit.
Even though we had seen The Last Shift, we're watching Malum and going, where are we going?
Yeah.
We know we're not going towards that original ending.
Yeah, it's
so
clearly
what's
not
going on.
It's clearly not going in that way because it's not setting up the ending that the original one set up.
Yeah.
It's going in a different direction, but where is that exactly?
Yeah. And you can see elements that were improvements on elements from The Last Shift. Okay,
100%.
like one of the elements from the movie that I thought that looks a little more goofy than scary is the guy with the inverted pentagram on his face. When that character shows up in this movie, you're like, oh my God!
The version of that character in this movie is a huge improvement. I did think he was still pretty good in the original movie, but it's way better in this.
Yeah, because like this one, he's like a straight up Cenobite almost.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
It's like full-on Clive Barker. It is way more bombastic than the original film was. The original film was a very stripped-down, quiet horror film that had these moments of just freakiness. Whereas this movie is way more in your face right away. Yeah. It still has those moments of quiet creepiness. It goes to 11 a lot faster.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
It builds up a lot quicker and it is a lot more consistent.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of the scares in the original Last Shift, they were cool, and when you see those scenes in isolation, they're really, really good, but some of them come up in the film like jump scares.
Yeah, there are some of them that are jump scares.
Yeah, and you're just and when they sort of happen, you're like, oh, was that it? And then it's kind of over. And this one, they build and they build and they build until they get to where they're going.
Oh, yeah, with the overall story.
Yeah, because like there's still moments where like a character will turn and there'll be like a weird guy in the fucking mirror. But rather than feeling like it's somewhat isolated, this one builds them much more properly to the point where you don't find yourself figuring out exactly how they're connected, because they let you know.
Oh yeah, well that's the other thing. There's actually like overall more story here than there was in the original. The main character is kind of just an unlucky victim of what's going on inside this haunted police precinct. Whereas in this film, she's way more involved in what's going on.
Yeah.
It builds into a very Clive Barker story. Stuff like The Void comes to mind.
Yes, yeah.
Like this. I was also thinking of Baskin. Baskin was another movie I was thinking of when we get towards the end.
Well, that's one of the pinnacles of Cops Go In.
Yeah.
Come out.
Yeah. I just fucking love this movie from start to finish. It was nice to get a version of the movie that didn't have so many caveats like I had for the original film. Check out Malum. It's one of the best horror movies of the year, and I look forward to all the films that this filmmaker and his team will make next.
Yeah, this is a quantum improvement.
With that said, Malum is currently available on various streaming platforms for you to rent or to buy, and I highly recommend you do either and you check it out for yourself. Just, pick your poison and enjoy. And with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, we're going to move on to the spoilers so that we can finally talk about, the differences between these two movies, because a lot of it is really in the spoiler territory.
Yes.
So with that said, let us move on to the spoilers.
So correct me if I'm wrong, in the original, it's basically by the end of it, she's possessed.
By the end of it, the idea is she thinks the precinct is being assaulted by all of the cult.
Right.
And she goes on a shooting spree shooting all the cult members. But then it turns out they're actually the hazmat team that was supposed to come in and pick up all the drugs and shit that were in the evidence locker as part of the final phase of decommissioning the police precinct. As she's bleeding out when one of the cops shoots her, the demon in the movie, Paimon in that movie, because in that movie, the cult leader's name is Paimon and the demon is Paimon.
Gotcha.
And Paimon shows up and puts a sheet over her head with the implication being that Paimon has just taken her soul. And there's a loose implication that this whole thing was part of a ritual to summon Paimon, but it's not very clear. It's much clearer in this movie.
It's way clearer.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
In this movie, first off, we have a slightly different setup going on, because in the original movie, the cop is just assigned to this shift.
Yeah.
And she has a dad who had died in the line of duty taking down this cult, but apparently they covered up the fact that the cult didn't die in the shootout at the barn that they raided. The cult was actually taken back to the police precinct, and then they hung themselves.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was weird, because I understand why the police would cover up them hanging the cult, but I didn't understand why they were covering up the cult hanging themselves, because it'd be very easy to spin the whole cult killing themselves because they were a crazy cult.
That's easy.
And no one's going to really blame the cops for that, right? Or at least not enough people are going to, especially with what the cult was accused of, which was killing a bunch of teenage girls.
Yeah, a bunch of cultists killed themselves in a prison cell. No one's going to get real upset.
Exactly. And in that movie, her dad was a hero who died in the raid on that barn. In this movie, her dad did go into that barn, did save all those girls, but survived it. But then after surviving it, starts getting influenced by the ghosts of the fucking precinct.
Yeah.
Because the cult members actually were brought back and basically hung themselves again in this case, but it wasn't covered up. And he ends up shooting half the precinct, like it's fucking Terminator or some shit.
Yeah. You get to watch that happen, by the way.
Yeah. He ends up shooting them and then killing himself. So her dad in this is a hero who got turned into a murderer, and in the original one, it's just a hero. This changes the motivation of the main character, because in the original one, she was just, trying to be a cop, to live up to her dad and all that stuff, and she just gets stuck with the shitty fucking night shift at this decommissioned precinct.
Yeah. And this one, she actually is trying to figure out what actually happened.
Yeah, she wants to know what happened to her dad, so she volunteers for the job so that she can go in and try to figure out what the fuck happened.
Yeah. Now, here's the really, really good part. They don't waste your time with that mystery, because part of the answer before the main character does.
Oh, yeah.
So they don't waste your time.
No, they don't.
Within 10 minutes of her going there and starting the investigation is when, like, the weird shit begins.
Oh, yeah. And some of the shit is stuff from the original one. Like, there's a bum who pees.
Yeah.
And she puts in the holding cell. And there's a weird guy who's, like, beating lockers when she gets in there, who yells at her and is super fucking, like misogynistic.
Yeah.
Like, those are similar from the original one. But then there's also stuff that is slightly different in this one because she's actively investigating what happened to her dad. What she slowly figures out over the course of this movie is that she used to be in the cult.
She was born into the cult. She was like a little kid.
She was born into the cult, and her mom was in the cult, and her dad saved her mom from the cult, which is why the dad was obsessed with the cult in the first place and trying to take it down.
Yeah.
She was born to be the vessel of this new demon. Now, I don't know if they actually named the demon in this.
They didn't name him in this.
But I know the cult leader in this is now named Malum.
Yeah. So the ghosts are all fucked up.
Yeah.
Okay, they're all terrifying.
Yep.
But the cult leader himself looks like the kind of cult leader shithead that you would fucking encounter, like, on the news. You know, he's got a sweater, he's dressed like Carl Sagan and shit.
Yep. And there's also, like, a connection between the demon and pigs.
Yes.
Hence the killing of the cops and stuff like that.
Killing the pigs.
There's even a cool addition to this movie where there's a pig that's left out of the police station that she doesn't know what to do with. So she just kind of brings it into a cell and feeds it some food until someone can come by and pick it up.
Yeah.
And then the pig turns out to be like one of the victims of the cult that they killed and fed to a pig.
Yeah.
And it turns into that victim and starts chasing her around.
Yeah. And so later on, you see, like, one of the other, like, ghosts of the cult leaders. Sometimes they got a pig on a leash, and sometimes it's this girl.
The interesting comparison is that the cult leaders look very similar. I don't think it's the same actor, but they look very similar. But they have slightly different performances in the two movies. He's a little bit more subdued in the original movie, like the kind of more quiet menace with the things he says. In this movie, he's fucking preaching.
He's testifying.
He's testifying every time he speaks, which kind of speaks to the tone difference between these two movies.
Yes.
It was very clear that the satanic cult, like in both movies, are based on the Manson family.
Yes.
But one is based more on a more realistic portrayal of how the Manson family acted, and the other one is the cinematic portrayal. The one you would see in, like, you know, like Rosemary's Baby or a cheesy 80s or like
movie.
Rob Zombie's interpretation of the Manson family.
They're way farther out there.
You see a lot more of what happened at the barn.
At the compound.
Yeah, at the compound, the barn that they were staying at. So you see a lot more of the cult outside of just being ghosts.
Yeah.
Which actually adds a lot more really interesting backstory and...
Well, but yeah, because it fills you with dread as to what that ghost is going to do when it shows up.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know, you're like, oh, God, that's the one that fucking ripped that girl's face off. What's it going to do? And then, like, the hand gets a little bit closer to a person's face. You're like, oh, here it comes.
I also like that they took some scenes from the original movie and kind of remixed them. It's the same idea, but from a different angle.
From a different angle at a different time. Yeah.
A great example of that being in both movies, she meets a prostitute.
Yeah.
In one movie, the prostitute is just kind of hanging out outside the police
she's
precinct.
like a complete red herring.
Yeah, she's just hanging out outside of it, and she's like smoking a cigarette, and like she tells her the whole story about the cult hanging themselves and all that stuff. That same prostitute shows up in this to the point where I'm pretty sure it's the same actress. If not, they got someone that looks identical.
Right.
This one, she runs into her when she's kicked out of a car after having implied to have bitten a John's dick off.
Yes.
Which again speaks to the different tones of these two movies.
Yeah, this one's way more splattery. You know?
In the original movie, there was a scene in which this cop shows up to help her and knew her father and is very nice and kind or whatever. And then as they're done talking, he's like, I gotta go. And he turns around and there's a gunshot wound in the back of his head.
Right.
There's no sting. It's very quiet, and it's a super effective creepy moment. They do a version of that in this movie, and it's the one instance where I feel like the original movie did something better.
I would agree. Yes.
In this movie, there's two cops who show up who we actually saw in the prologue.
Yeah.
Were friends with her dad. One of them shows her the shotgun that her dad did the murders with. Then he just kind of turns around and they turn it into a jump scare with his bullet wound in the front of his face now. And it worked, but I like the original versions of that scene.
Yeah.
It just gets under your skin more.
Yeah, you're like, oh, okay.
There's that dread in the original movie when that happens, like, oh shit, I'm just completely alone, right? That's a minor criticism of the movie. I still think it works. It's just, I happen to have seen the original movie, so I knew how that scene was done better the first time.
Yeah. It's probably the one.
It's the one. Because all the other stuff that they cut out from this movie, I didn't really need. I didn't really need all the chairs all stacked up and stuff. I didn't need that stuff. All the stuff they put in this movie, like with the pig and all that stuff, I like that better than the chairs.
Oh, it was way more entertaining,
And plus, this movie just builds up to a much better ending where she essentially descends into hell itself.
Which is in the basement, of course.
Which is in the basement past the shooting floor.
Yeah.
Where they do all the
practice shooting.
The lady with the bag on her head is in this one too. She was also in the original one. She was one of the best parts of the original one. And she's still great in this. The weird mummy lady with the bag on her head. And when we meet the demon, instead of just having a pentagram carved into the face like the original movie, their face is literally outstretched onto a pentagram. Their skin is outstretched into a pentagram on this circle like a fucking Clive Barker Cenobite. While their face behind it is just skinless.
Yeah. And at one point, this thing comes off,
Yep. It's just a very satisfying conclusion.
Yeah. It's also a little bit, it's also got a little bit of that Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, yeah.
You're just sort of like, hey, it's okay. This is always going to happen.
Yeah.
Not really your fault. It's all right.
Yep.
Yeah,
it is a fucking phenomenal remake. This movie kind of feels like the kind of update that like 80s remakes had on 50s movies.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's a great example. Like the difference between The Blob and the Blob 1988.
Exactly. There's some added backstory. There's some updated effects. The tone is a lot meaner.
Yeah. Or like a Thing from Another World versus John Carpenter's The Thing.
There's also a lot more commentary in this. In the original movie, the movie felt a lot more neutral about cops. This movie felt a little less neutral.
Well, this is an ACAB movie.
There's a lot more ACAB in this movie, and you can tell that was one of those shifting times.
Yes.
Things. Anyway, my fellow Gorehounds, do you have any final thoughts on Malum?
Malum is a great movie. I have no real misgivings about it, unlike Last Shift.
None whatsoever. Like, I liked Last Shift, but Last Shift had so much potential that was squandered by the end of it.
Yes.
And this movie lives up to all that potential.
Yes. There's a bit at the end, so watch through the credits.
Yes, watch through the credits. It's worth it.
It's worth it. And I think that's about it.
All right. Where can they find you, Count Jackula?
Well, you can find me on YouTube. Just look for Count Jackula. You'll find me there. I stream during the week, so please go in there, hit that subscribe button, and then follow me on Twitter at Counting Jack, because I always make announcements on Twitter over on Twitter when I stream.
It's okay.
Sorry, I used to be on Twitch.
There's a little bit of a...
Yeah. Sometimes I fuck up the cadence there. You can also follow me on Instagram at Satanic Jackula and at Real Count Jackula on TikTok, where I am probably also going to be doing stream announcements for the simple reason that I seem to be getting a lot more response from those apps.
That makes sense. Do it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Y'all know me. I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me at the Horror Guru on Twitter, on Twitch, on Instagram, and Facebook. Just look up the Horror Guru or Blood Splattered Cinema, and I'll be there. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you'd like to help out either of us more directly, be sure to check out our Patreon pages, and remember, if you go the Patreon route, even $1 a month can go a long way. If you made it this far into the video, then I want you to comment below, and be sure to comment below using the hashtag #PigsIsPigs. Use the hashtag #PigsIsPigs, that way I know, that way Jack knows, that way the whole world knows you watched this video all the way through. And with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, we're about to record one more vlog for this week, and we'll see you then.
Or maybe we won't see you. Or maybe we'll have to call
Maybe we'll be unseen.
Maybe we'll be unseen.